Now, of course, Japan and the U.S. aren't the only countries in the region. Even with China, that's not the whole picture. There is a whole network of other countries that are increasingly becoming part of, if not the formal alliance system, certainly the way Japan and the U.S. look at security in the region, with new institutions like the Quad, which involves Australia and India as well. You have defense development programs where Japan is cooperating with the UK and Italy on jet fighters, for example. So it seems like this kind of hub and spoke type system where the US was the hub and Japan was one of the spokes is now changing into something a little bit more like a network where lots of different countries are working together with each other. Is that the right way to look at things, and how does that change the way the U.S.-Japan alliance works and relates to other parts of the Indo-Pacific security structure?
Yeah, I think I agree with you that sort of hub and spoke system that we conventionally think of sort of U.S. alliance system in Asia is definitely changing. I mean, all these security pacts were forged in the shadow of the end of World War II, when U.S. had overwhelming power to offer security guarantees to these various partners in Asia, and these partners had little kind of cooperative agreements or relationship among each other. That's changing. As I said, U.S. doesn't have overwhelming power. U.S. is willing to let these countries work with each other also. And there is also sort of rise of the rest concept that these powers also accumulating wealth and power, so they can work with each other a lot more. And I think I would say that not only that, I think there's aspect about changing nature of threat. So for example, NATO, has this collective security environment where attack on one is attack on all, but it's also alliance based in among continental powers. When there is a huge invasion by Russia, for example, so all these countries face the same threat coming from Russia, but Asia, it's geographically sparse, and in oceans kind of dividing these countries. But now the threat is more not just land-based border invasion, but it's also about cyber. It's also about economic espionage. It's also about space and then technological cooperation. So there's a lot more venue for these countries that are still geographically sparse to work together. So I think these partnerships are important because the nature of threat is also changing, and there's so much more that these partners can do to address the shared challenges.
Not all countries have the same idea of the threat or its origin, though, especially in Asia. I think the rise of China has been the biggest change in the landscape. But if you look, for example, at how Japan or Australia sees that and how that's viewed in, say, Southeast Asia, it can be a lot more complicated. Japan came up with this idea of a free and open Indo-Pacific, which is a kind of philosophy or guiding principle that on one level is meant to kind of bind everyone in the region behind some common principles that we can agree on. It's been an easier sell in some places than in other places. Tell me a little bit about that, and tell me what's necessary to win over the more skeptical countries to this idea.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think these countries in Asia still vary in regime types and so level of economic development, level of sort of age of population, and so these countries have different needs and at the different levels attracted to Chinese market, for example, or more vulnerable to Chinese economic coercion, for example. But I think fundamentally, these countries still do share the interest in sort of preserving their sovereignty and territorial integrity. And that doesn't really differ regardless of the size of economy or size of country. So I think the most important thing to attract these countries' support to a free and open Indo-Pacific concept, for example, is to focus on that. So basically to provide more capacity building support for these countries so that they can sort of fend off pressures from Chinese maritime ships coming into their borders, for example. And so I think that sort of approach to address the biggest common denominator among these states. And so I think that's most important when we think about Southeast Asian countries, that they care about national sovereignty. They don't necessarily want to choose between Japan, China, or United States, or even India and Japan. I don't think they want to choose, but they do want to preserve their national sovereignty and territorial integrity. So I think we should address those concerns and listen to what they want out of the partnership from Japan and the United States. So that's one. But at the same time, with countries that share more economic development, for example, Japan, and the UK, then we can do a lot more. So, the fighter jet investment that UK, Italy, and Japan are doing, that's a different level of cooperation. And I think that's fine. I think we should tailor different levels of cooperation to the capability of different partners.
Professor Mori, do you think a free and open Indo-Pacific that lots of different countries can sign up to, is that gaining traction, or is it still sort of wishful thinking?
I think the term free and open Indo-Pacific has permeated through not only the Indo-Pacific region, but also beyond. And I think this is a reflection of this sort of a sense of uncertainty felt by many countries. Where are we heading? And many countries have actually come to conclude that they want a rules-based order. Basically, this means, in the Japanese version, this basically means an international order rooted in three basic principles. One is freedom, second is rule of law, and the third is connectivity. And I think under these three principles, many countries have actually probably are able to kind of sign up to this. They have different versions of their own Indo-Pacific visions or outlook or whatever maybe strategy and so forth. But there is this basic notion that all countries would want to be free from coercion and force. And they would rather see international rules and norms such as respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, peaceful resolution of disputes, and non-use of force be honored and upheld. And also connectivity. Everybody wants to achieve economic growth. So they want to enhance and invigorate economic interaction, commercial activities, and also people-to-people exchange. And so this is the basic vision for an international order that Japan actually proposed initially. And I think different countries do have different versions, but more or less, I think they share this kind of vision. The way we advance and sort of pursue this vision differs from country to country. But I think it has sort of resonated with other regional states. And these various kinds of security partnerships and cooperative frameworks that we're having, on a not only bilateral but on a multilateral basis, these are all vehicles to actually achieve this vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific. And speaking to the security aspect that Teraoka-san was talking about, different regional states have different security needs. And I think this sort of a tailored, functional, area-based engagement with regional states really fits in to the various kinds of differing security demands that countries have. One of the sort of common demands is maritime security. And there, I think frameworks like the Quad has launched what they call the Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Initiative, which kind of shares maritime domain awareness information with regional states, and that helps these regional states. So rather than having a sort of a NATO-type institution-based security framework, it's, are you all in or all out? But rather having this kind of a tailored security partnerships allows countries to cooperate with each other to enhance regional security. And I think that's what's exactly happening under this FOIP framework. And everybody probably appreciates this kind of cooperation going forward. Yeah.
I think some of the initial reaction to the framework was that maybe it's a new label for China containment.
Initially,
containment.
Yeah, right.
But as Dr. Teraoka mentioned, if you're not forcing countries to choose and it's more flexible, then
and inclusive, by the way. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's better. Yeah.
And just one thing, I think it also leaves the door open for China to be free and open. That's, I think, one most important thing is, over the last decades or so, we try to make China more open and free. That's not working right now, But I think having that concept is not exclusive. The fact that it's not exclusive to China means that we would want China to be open and free. And I think that actually serves people who actually in China also. Not many people hate to be free and open.
So now let's turn to a couple of challenges facing the alliance, near term and longer term, and some things in the news are part of that. We just had an election in Taiwan. You mentioned Taiwan a little bit earlier in the conversation. The new president takes office in May. What are the implications for what's happening in Taiwan for the alliance? And separately, what should Japan and the U.S. do together or separately to manage rising tensions in the Taiwan Strait?
Yeah, I think that Taiwan still continues to be a real issue going forward, and it kind of sharpens sort of defense or thinking of defense planners and strategy planners in Japan and United States and many countries about what to do with challenges posed by China. So President-elect Lai Ching-te has been assuring that he will continue on sort of direction of current President Tsai Ing-wen's foreign policy that's sort of moderate and standing firm against Chinese coercion, but still open to dialogue with the mainland, while also working with partners and not declaring de jure independence. That sort of hits the best tone that makes it easier for allies to work with Taiwan because Taiwan is being moderate and very reasonable in its foreign policy toward mainland. So I think the DPP victory was a good signal, despite the fact they lost. They didn't control the legislative yuan. Now Taiwan has a new House Speaker from KMT who might be a lot more pro-Taiwan, pro-mainland than DPP leadership is. So that twisted political dynamics might complicate the way the U.S. or Japan can cooperate with Taiwan if Taiwan itself doesn't have the unity over foreign policy direction. But DPP still has executive branch and will continue to want to work with allies on defense issues because if it has the support from U.S. or Japan or other like-minded countries, when they engage dialogue with the mainland, they stand strong when they engage in dialogue with the mainland. So that's the position we want Taiwan to be. When Taiwan negotiates with the mainland, they know that they have support from other partners so that they don't necessarily have to concede too much when mainland doesn't give enough bargaining on the table. I think that's sort of the state of the relationship we want to ensure. Right now, I think societal ties between Taiwan and Japan are very strong. Political ties are also developing in a way that the leaders visiting high-level visits between Tokyo Metropolitan Governor Koike to Taiwan or the heads of sort of LDP leadership going to Taiwan, that's very strong. That's very good. But I think going forward, I think we would have to think deeply about what Japan needs to do in terms of defense cooperation with Taiwan without provoking mainland unnecessarily. I think it's hard for Japan to do this because we don't have many changes in the government. Oftentimes when, for example, the Trump presidency came in, kind of lifted a lot of sort of taboos or sort of traditional framework to engage with Taiwan. There was a lot of controversy and provocation that probably was risky, but that also opened up, for example, for Pentagon to open its own specific Taiwan desk or Taiwan office in Pentagon. That wasn't happening before Trump presidency. So all these things that we might have to do to strengthen ties, dialogues, intelligent cooperation with Taiwan to prepare for contingency, it's not still in place. And I think Taiwan and Japan have to think deeply about what needs to be done with a lot more sense of urgency.